buzzword, but for many others, this is a new area to explore opportunities in blockchain ecosystem. A lot is happening in the NFT space, and we understand the importance of having the right information to best utilize the resources available to us. Welcome to the 43rd episode of PEEPanEIP. I'm your host, Pooja Ranjan. Today, we are going to learn about an Ethereum standard that recently got final status among the ERC category. To talk about EIP-2981 NFT royalty standard, we are joined by one of the co-authors of the proposal, Blaine, Malone, who worked as R&D engineer at Gemini Exchange. We are also joined by Anatolikova, who is leading the NFT standardization group, William Shaw, who is a cat blazer and future ERC editor, sending support to ERC standardization, Quezon from a project building DeFi NFT stuff in the Avalanche ecosystem. So welcome to the show, Blaine. This is the first NFT proposal we'll be discussing in the show, and I'm super excited to hear what you have got to share. But before that, I'd be curious to know how you joined the blockchain community. So let's start with a quick introduction.
Yep, thanks, Pooja, for having me on. I'm excited to talk about this. So I've actually got a slide for this. So a little bit about myself. My name's Blaine Malone. I'm a software engineer. I'm currently working for Gemini in the research department. Gemini is a cryptocurrency exchange. I should also say that opinions expressed here are my own and do not represent those of my employers. But I've been around the cryptocurrency space for around 5-ish years now. My first introduction to cryptocurrency was through the lens of smart contracts, so specifically on the Ethereum platform. Tinkering around with this for a while, I fell deeper into the space. And I suppose the question here is, how did I get interested in royalty payments specifically? Well, I think one of the things that captured my imagination was when I first discovered NFTs was the idea that like metadata could be attached to what is essentially a deed. And you'll see the term deed thrown around in the 721 spec quite a bit, but the NFT term stuck a little better. But not only has this concept of metadata been used for artists to get creative and build projects that we know and love, but it's also allowed creators to embed rules that they'd like to see enforced. So royalties is actually a nice example of this in action. When I first read about it, I saw the kind of fragmented market of royalties and thought that this could be solved quite elegantly by extending the idea of attaching kind of metadata to NFTs. So I thought tackling this problem would lead to impactful results. And the idea that blockchain can help creators monetize their work was something I really wanted to help contribute to build. I know there's a lot more laws and regulations around royalty payments in the United States, and the laws around in the United States sometimes state that there's no recourse for unpaid royalties in the US. So if there was some way we could use Ethereum network and blockchains to kind of incentivize royalties to be paid, then I think that's great. So yeah, the royalty standard in general, that's the introduction. But from a high level, I'd like to talk about the why. So like why we need this, the how, so like how ecosystem participants can implement it. And then I'll have like a shorter section on looking forward into the future of royalty payments on Ethereum specifically. I think before I continue, I know it's the eve of EIP-1559, so I'd like to give a shout out to everyone involved in that. It's a huge milestone for the Ethereum community, so very exciting stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just a short slide here on acknowledgments. Like, it's important to mention all the people who've worked on this EIP, and if a lot of rigor and was applied over many months to ensure that the most optimal scheme was proposed. It's kind of one of the newer aspects I've been introduced to is it's like writing standards isn't an easy feat. So I kind of pay homage to everyone who give their insight into how the ecosystem participants might interact with this proposal. There's definitely some very valuable insights from people in the space. and really did help mold the idea into what we think is a solid foundation for moving forward. So you've got Zach, James again, and then there's more notable contributors that really did help mold the spec. Okay, thought this might be useful because sometimes you don't know how long these things went on for, but it was first put into draft status around September 2020. It was actually proposed before this in August. It stayed in draft state right up until the 18th of June. So there was a lot of different changes, a lot of spec changes. I noticed some people actually implemented the royalty EIP-2981 before the spec was finalized, and then they had to kind of like go back on that. So luckily, when we went into review stage, it didn't change too much after that point. And then we finalized there a couple of weeks ago. So there's a lot of discussions, a lot of active participants. So this is just kind of what we're going to look at. What are royalties, ecosystem participants, the current state of the nation, can we enforce royalties? Then a little bit about implementation, and then rationale for the implementation as well as looking forward. So to be thorough, I consulted Wikipedia to get the grander definition of royalties and what it means to the world. If you go down the rabbit hole of royalties specifically tied to the entertainment industry, music and the like, you'll quickly realize it's not so straightforward. But to us, and for this presentation, we're going to restrict the domain to NFT art, just so we can describe more concrete scenarios and just to kind of make it more easily understood. So instead of this verbose definition, I'm going to just define something a little bit more simple. So this is payments to rightful recipients. So in our case, creators of NFTs, or a bunch of creators in perpetuity by a predefined set of rules. So you'll kind of get an idea when we look at the API what this exactly means. But in essence, payments are going to be made to an Ethereum address after the notion of a sale is executed, and the rightful recipient receives the payment in whatever denominated currency they've specified. So in the next slide, we're going to look at ecosystem participants, and this will really give us like the essence of what we're trying to get across here. So from a very high level, we've got 3 participants, and you've got the creator. So let's take, for example, an artist has an idea for an NFT, launches a 721 or 1155 contract. The marketplace lists this with a sale price and allows them to set royalties. And then the buyer interacts with marketplace and purchases the NFT, and the royalties are sent to creator. So like this is good, but there is a fly in the ointment, so to speak. So let's dig into what this is. Well, if you actually look into what happens after a few more sales of this NFT, and when it spans different marketplaces, you'll soon realize that the current infrastructure is actually quite siloed, and royalty information isn't shared between marketplaces. And even if it was shared between marketplaces, this doesn't really scale, and it doesn't allow for a truly permissionless system where anyone could enter and fully take advantage of the network. So you probably guessed it from the diagram that the idea of a sale is kind of just an abstract concept. So if we step through it here, I'm not sure if you can definitely see everything on the diagram, but there's at step 1, the creator creates the NFT and lists it on marketplace 1. Step 2, it's available for the world to see. Step 3, the buyer, so buyer 1 purchases this. The marketplace performs 2 things. It will transfer the funds from the buyer to the seller, and then a transfer of the NFT to the buyer. So the third thing here would be step number 4, which is a successful royalty payment transfer. from the marketplace to the creator of the NFT. And then let's say, for example, buyer 1 then relists this NFT on marketplace 2. Well, buyer 2 then comes in and purchases it. And the same steps apply, kind of the abstract notation of a sale. But you'll quickly realize that step 7 doesn't occur because there's no information sharing between these marketplaces. And the creator of the NFT actually doesn't get the funds that they set up and are expected to get. So obviously lots of different marketplaces of bespoke ways of doing this, but this is the kind of fundamental similarities between all approaches that exist right now. And yeah, so that's the state of things at the minute. And like I said, there are more nuances to this, but this is kind of the overarching look at things. So let's take a step back for a minute and look at how 2981 approaches this. So there was a lot of questions around the discussion boards on this EIP about, like, can't we enforce royalties? And that, like, in an ideal world, I think that sounds great. But if you start to dig into it a little bit more, you'll notice that there are some problems. So with the current architecture, the smart contract, so the 721 or 1155 contracts, funds never touch the contract. So if you want to enforce things, you're going to have smart contract code on chain to kind of take care of this. So that's one thing. The funds actually never touch the chain, so there'll have to be some updates there. And then the 721 spec specifically, sales are indistinguishable from transfers. So you'll notice that I mentioned earlier about marketplaces. Marketplaces they're the ones that created this idea of a sale. So sale is just an abstract concept. The smart contract isn't aware of the sale price. It's not aware of the currency it's involved in. And you can actually just transfer this thing around as long as you have the keys to do it. So you need to make the contract itself aware of all of these things. So like with so many things in crypto, trying to decentralize an architecture usually has some trade-offs. So let's continue down this thought. At first glance, there's 3 approaches that seem attractive here. You can, like I mentioned earlier, you can force every smart contract transfer to also consume the funds of the sale. Well, I mean, like, one of the major drawbacks of this approach is that it's easily bypassed while adding unnecessary complexity. You could perform the transfer with a nominal amount of ETH and then perform the final settlement again after. The main reason this can be done because the smart contract has no way of validating what the agreed upon sale price is. The only time that this could be true is if the pricing mechanism was built into the logic itself, but then this kind of removes any price discovery for the NFT's value. So that's the first one. Second one is lock down the transfer and force the owner to check with a trusted party. This is, like, in my opinion, pretty unfriendly for the collector. If something happened whereby the approval process broke, so you're relying on a trusted party here, the NFT could be locked to that wallet forever, and it would take a significant risk on the value of those NFTs, and then you're kind of predisposing yourself to the problem of custody and keys there, and whether or not marketplaces are handling that correctly. Third one is revocation of NFTs if royalties aren't paid. Again, I think this is very unfriendly for the collector. And it also kind of blurs the line of ownership. So you're, like, including a revocation feature in something that's meant to be a deed. And I know that artists wouldn't necessarily do this because if their reputation is on the line, but disputes can happen, and people can do these things. So one thing from, like, being in this area for a bit is realizing that marketplaces want to implement royalties frameworks. They're incentivized to implement royalties. it attracts new creators to their platforms, which in turn brings more buyers. So incentives align for everybody, and actually an opt-in model works quite well. So to summarize, the issue isn't enforcement, it's the adoption of a cross-platform compatibility. So this is really what 2189 tries to solve here. And you'll notice that the abstract on 2189 says a standardized way to receive royalty payment information for NFTs to enable universal support for royalty payments across all NFT marketplaces. So we've got this XKCD comic here, and you'll probably have seen this before, but it's definitely the right direction to build a foundational royalty information EIP for Ethereum. So it can always be the kind of default usage for displaying this royalty information. By itself, probably not a silver bullet, but it will definitely help existing royalty payments shortcomings. Okay, so let's get into the implementation. The crux of the opt-in model requires some way to store this royalty metadata, like I mentioned earlier, for a given contract. And part of the work involved defining this function as a percentage-based model returns an undisputable royalty information sale price. So we're really asking the contract to perform the calculations based upon the sale price. So the contract only ever knows about the sale price when we invoke this function. Contract performs some calculations and gives the response back. On the next slide, we'll look at an example implementation. And I think both marketplaces and creators should pay attention to the details here, because some of it can get kind of nuanced. Okay, so this is an example of setting royalties on a per token basis. So if you're familiar with 721 spec, you can have multiple NFT tokens in a single smart contract. This mapping here could be removed, and you could set global royalty information for the whole contract. But this is just kind of showing a little bit more advanced use case. So you'll need to obviously set the royalties per token. So that's what this set token royalty function is doing. And it's helpful to use kind of the traditional finance terminology around basis points, because a lot of times when you're calculating percentages, you want like more than 0 decimal places. So you want around 2 decimal places. So basis points works quite well here. We know that math in Solidity is done entirely using fixed point. So yeah, we'll want to account for that and get 2 decimal places. So just looking a little bit more in detail at this, this is kind of what I was saying about keeping the accuracy. It's actually up to the marketplaces to make sure that they know what currency this thing is being sold in, because like I said, the contract doesn't know about this. So if you are selling it an NFT and want to pay royalties out in ETH, well, you're actually going to want to use the smallest denomination of that currency. So you're going to want to pass in the wave value. Now, I know a lot of smart contract developers already kind of know these things, but it's something worth kind of driving. It's a point worth driving home, I think, because you could lose, like for the example in the bottom left corner here, you could lose 0.75 ETH of in a certain situation. So just the accuracy matters. And then an actual implementation of the function that was defined in the spec. So you can see here that in the top right of the screen, sale price should be in the smallest denomination of the currency tendered. This assumes that the function's only ever invoked externally too, but that's not defined exactly by the spec. We don't think there's any state modification when the function should just be a calculation and return of a value. It's not pure because you still read some state from the smart contract itself. And then again here, we're dividing by 10,000 basis points. So we're kind of keeping that accuracy. The call side of this function would be on the marketplace side. So before sending any royalty payments, they should obtain the undisputed recipient and royalty amount, and they would get that by invoking this function. Yeah, there are some subtle edge cases. As previously mentioned, implementers can get creative with the percentage-based calculation, but there are some important caveats to consider, and mainly ensuring that the royalty info function is not aware of the unit of exchange, and that unpredictable variables are avoided in the percentage calculation. So why does it need to stay unaware of the unit of exchange? Well, I mean, the reason it must be currency agnostic is because the moment you introduce, say, a conditional check on the sale price variable, you actually assume the unit of account. It is very subtle, but say you have an if statement in here that says, if 100, then do X. Well, this begs the question, 100 what? Is it 100 wrapped Dogecoin, or is it 100 Ethereum? So you're really, there's a little bit of nuance there, and the spec does talk about this. So if you want more information, you can look at that. The second one, which is avoiding unpredictable variables, is interesting, and it's one must kind of like be careful to not assume the contents of a variable that can have its state mutated in many ways. So the spec highlights an interesting example using block timestamp. Now, there's, like I said, people can get creative with these things, but I'd say 99% of teams and implementers will kind of just stick to the normal, static percentage, fixed percentage based model. But to dig into the timestamp example, let's say a marketplace delays X days before invoking royalty info and sending the payment. Well, if the royalty information was calculated based on a block timestamp, for example, then we know that every time you invoke this function, a different result is going to be returned. So let's say the marketplace receives Y royalty amount, which was significantly different from the royalty amount that would have been calculated X days prior if no delay had occurred. Then the royalty recipient is actually going to be kind of dissatisfied with the delay from the marketplace, and for this reason they'd raise a dispute. So again, I know at the surface it looks like a simple percentage calculation, and in most of the cases it will be, but there are some nuances to consider. So this is just a test case from an example repository by one of the contributors. So you can imagine this would kind of be like the code on a marketplace. You can see that the percentage is set to 2.5% or 250 basis points, and that keeps the two decimal places of precision. And it could look like this, where the expected result is in the smallest unit of account for the currency tendered. So we're talking about Ether here. So the currency tendered is Ether, and the smallest unit of account is way. So you'll notice that when we pass the royalty info parameters, we've got this 10 to the power of 18 large number that actually represents 1 Ether. So that was the sale price. And then we get back this other equally large number, but which is actually 0.025 Ether. So just got a currency converter here that kind of shows you that. And again, the obvious one is the address to send this to. So let's talk about that. The address, there was a bit of back and forth, should I say, on the discussion forums about whether we should be returning an array of addresses or just a single address. And the community kind of settled on a single address. And if there was multiple addresses returned, it would increase the complexity on the marketplace side. we didn't want to do this. We said that we're actually not getting ourselves into a cul-de-sac by returning one address, because if someone did want to do more complex royalty splitting to multiple creators or participants, they could actually have that address be a smart contract itself that performs the royalty splitting. So you can, that address can actually be a proxy contract or just a externally owned account. So the complexity can still be there if you want it. So it just makes for a cleaner API here. Okay, so talk through some, I have give some of the rationale here. Actually, before I talk about the rationale, I'll just show you, I kind of like got this together quickly before the presentation, but and it's by no means production ready or anything, but this kind of shows you what it looks like, just if you wanted to visualize it. So you've got this set token royalty function, similar to the slides I just shown. So I'm just saying for token ID 0, the recipient is this address, and it's 2.5% for every token that's sold here. And then when the marketplace calls this function with a 1/8 sale price, you'll see that this is the result of the royalty amount, and it keeps the precision. So yeah, very straightforward. I'd say 99% of the use cases will be something very similar to this. But yeah. Yeah, rationale. So I kind of alluded to this, simple royalty payments to a single address. You know, we wanted to really go for minimal, kind of gas efficient building blocks here. And again, we didn't want to stifle anything with this design. So we've kind of thought about those edge cases. You know, the address, again, it could be a multi-sig contract. It could be anything. But I'd say, again, 99% of the use cases, it'll probably be in their externally owned account. On-chain royalty payment percentage calculation. Well, like you've seen, this is important because it avoids disputes with participants over how much is owed in royalties. So if you predefine the rules for this token on which the royalties are calculated, then the smart contract performs the calculation, and it's kind of undisputable at that point. Unitless royalty payment across all marketplaces, both on-chain and off-chain. This is pretty cool. So like you can use any currency as the smart contract isn't currency aware, and that's really up to the marketplace and how they do things internally. You know, the marketplace should know what currency they're dealing with. If it's ETH, then cool, just send a normal ETH transaction to the royalty recipient. But if it's ERC20, then again, the marketplace needs to kind of handle that. It's possible that other EIPs could define how the currency should be decided upon. For now, the smart contract is kind of just doesn't enforce the unit of account. And universal royalty payments, you know, this isn't, because it's an interface, it isn't restricted to just 721 and 1155 contracts. You know, any contract in the future or any existing contract could just implement this, and basically through ERC 165, you know, can signal that they support royalty payments, and marketplaces can kind of be aware of that. And then looking forward, so you know, this gets us pretty far actually. You know, if we can get the community to converge on a single way of representing royalty information so that payments can be made, then that's a very good stepping stone. We understand that there's a lot of solutions out there already. So we've seen some of the community members build more ideas, and there are talks going on right now about a royalty registry. So the idea being that this royalty registry would be governed by the community, and a marketplace might actually, you can think of it as like a level of indirection between the marketplace and actually asking for the royalty information. So you would invoke royalty info on the registry, and then the registry takes care of the interoperability between different 721 contracts and how they represent the royalty information. But we anticipate a lot of people using 2981. So yeah, there's that. And a lot of people in the community are also talking about royalty reporting. So like, we do want to be able to signal when a royalty should be paid, and who it's owed to, and auditability. We want to make sure that if someone hasn't paid royalty, that like it's kind of like publicly visible and you can see it. But again, incentives align so that opt-in model really should work for this type of thing. And then I thought this was quite interesting, which is a communal payments API to make royalty payments for marketplaces easier. So the idea being that we could actually have a smart contract function that takes various parameters and just sends the payment, and is a lower overhead for ecosystem participants, including marketplaces, to kind of like actually send these things. So that was interesting. And then I suppose an actual query API for other Web3 apps to kind of just look for royalty informations from existing NFTs. So I'd encourage anyone who's interested to join the Discord channel. There's GitHub is great for discussions, but it's for kind of spitballing new ideas going forward. This is a lot more effective in my opinion. So we're discussing further improvements, further EIPs, maybe not EIPs, but actual infrastructure. So yeah, jump in there. There's also some references here. Manifold is looking at a royalty registry. There's an example implementation. So some of the code I had in the slides today, that's taken from there. And I've got a Twitter thread on kind of like a summary of this whole slide deck. So that's the end of the talk. All ideas are welcome in the Discord channel. Everybody's pretty friendly. So if there's any questions, like, please unmute and we can talk.
Sure. Thank you for the presentation. That was really nice. Personally, I have been waiting for a while to get this proposal to the final status to have it discussed in the show. There are very few ERCs reaching to the final status, as mostly people get busy with the work and the project they are doing it. And in absence of champion, it barely moves out of the draft status. Thank you for sticking around and taking this proposal to the list of Ethereum standards. And the presentation today, I'm sure that's going to be very helpful for people who would actually like to implement this proposal. Let me first open the floor for other participants of the call if they have any questions for you.
Hey, Blaine. Yeah, this is an awesome presentation, and thanks for this. I think, we've been looking at this for a little while, and we saw how this really can become a primitive in the NFT space. And I think one of the bigger questions that we were trying to get an understanding of, right, is if you wanted to do more complex royalties like time-based royalties or decaying royalties, like how do you see like kind of marketplaces handling that, right? Or just even infrastructurally within the EIP itself?
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic there around kind of like linear decay of royalties over time, and it was a conversation raised a few times in the discussions on GitHub. So I can definitely link you to that, but my takeaway from it was this current design doesn't stifle those sorts of ideas. So the kind of block timestamp example that I mentioned earlier, you can kind of wield that to change that percentage function calculation over time. I'm sure there's maybe a few more ways of doing it, and I'm sure people will come out with more standard implementations of that. But yeah, the conclusion we came to was this doesn't stifle those ideas. I definitely think it's more of a a crypto developer idea and the one that everyone finds cool in crypto. And I agree. I just think that a lot of royalties in the real world kind of don't work that way. And we definitely think like 99% of them will be simple calculations, but I'm all for those kind of outlandish let's decay royalties ideas.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, 100%, but it's just paying attention to the fact that like the NFT space is in essence a unique space and it just offers us so much flexibility. You know, Adam we worked together on our project. I know we were kind of going back and forth. He probably has some questions as well.
Yeah, I think that was the principal one. And also Blaine, Pooja, thank you so much for putting on the presentation. It's been great so far. Yeah, I think we were thinking about some more complex use cases and just wondering if either this EIP or in the future you plan to just even support those type of interfaces, or if those conversations are going on so we can kind of put in both our own 2 cents from what we've been learning and also try to leverage kind of best practice in the community that's been discussed thus far.
Yeah, I would love to see people kind of picking up that idea just from a purely kind of tech standpoint. I think I would be interested in seeing the solution there. I'd say definitely jump into the Discord channel there listed on screen. Your ideas are more than welcome. Like I said, everyone's pretty friendly and they'd love to see people kind of thinking about these ideas. So definitely let's talk about it.
Great. And then just one more to kind of build on that. It seems as though this is still built on an opt-in model on the level of the marketplace. I know you had discussed kind of some pros and cons of what may be able to get around that in some hacky kind of Solidity ways, but do you see a future wherein this can be baked into the nature of the contract itself as opposed to purely opt-in from a higher level abstraction? So obviously you can still do kind of some over-the-counter stuff and get around it with a simple transfer and mints, what have you, by potentially borrowing the underlying mint function unless it's internal or something along those lines.
Yeah, I definitely think some creators are going to come out with variants on 721 that might include a revocation feature. They might include this idea of an approval process where it gets sent to an intermediary first. And that kind of like enforces it in a sense. But I think, like a lot of the conversations happening right now are around the reporting of royalties being owed. And I think with the already existing incentives there, for marketplaces actually want to send these royalties, it gets creators, it gets more buyers and increases revenue. So there's those core incentives, but the other incentives are as soon as these things are starting to be kind of like audited and reported in say Solidity event logs or things like that. And that further increases the incentivization to actually pay these royalty payments, because there will be a centralized registry of what addresses have been owed. What have they received all of their royalties? If they haven't, then this address owes them royalties. And a lot of these addresses are actually kind of easily mapped to market participants, i.e. marketplaces, different things like that. But yeah, to answer your question, we probably will see some variance on people trying to enforce royalties. Right now, from my perspective, that's not where it's going. Seems like the opt-in model works well, but yeah, we'll see. It's still early days. This is definitely like a step in the right direction anyway. It's pretty fundamental to either kind of split in the crossroads. So yeah.
And you end up with an inherent kind of an inherent challenge also, which is if you really want to lock down your insure royalties, essentially you have to eliminate the possibility of being able to simply transfer for the sake of transferring or gifting an NFT. Because the second that there's some kind of pure transfer or gift option, it can just be used for collusion between a buyer and seller to avoid the royalties anyway. And so I think that even without the royalties registry, I really do think that there's a large space to say that without being overly restrictive, we can't force it. The ecosystem looks like they want to do it. We might as well rely on that kind of solution.
Yeah, brilliant point, William. I completely agree. It's, you know, baked into the 721 spec that you can just transfer these things without any checks. So and the abstract idea of a seal isn't baked into that spec. So it's kind of, that's what we're working with. I agree that, you know, 721 is a deed. It's like a rights to ownership of something, and that's kind of the playground, so to speak.
Also, maybe just a quick point on what you were saying, and Adam, what you were asking about 721 variants. I do believe that Zora Protocol is trying to do something like that, like baked into the 721 itself. So it might be something to kind of check out. I know their basic model is that they wanted the actual like buy and sell transactions to be happening through the NFT contract.
Yeah, and you'll notice that if you check out the there's a GitHub repository that Manifold created, and it's kind of this rudimentary royalty registry at the minute, and it's pulling in royalty information from different marketplaces, and Zora is one of those. And you'll notice that Zora is like a little bit more kind of complex to weave into this common interface. But yeah, you're right, they're doing something different. It kind of reminds me of you know, the CryptoPunks contract. Although it's not 721, it's kind of got that marketplace baked into it, and it's got the idea of seals. So yeah, it's an interesting model. Keep an eye on it.
A couple questions, if I could actually. One is, do you have like one of the, I mean, the real promise, I'd say, of 2981 is if we see the major marketplaces decide to adopt. Do you have any idea if places like OpenSea especially are considering integrating it?
Yeah, so this is interesting because, you know, I sometimes think of, if there's a marketplace that has a kind of monopoly on the NFT market right now, is there incentive to open up their royalties platform? Because in essence, they're actually keeping people on their platform by having a closed, siloed royalty system. It's a, honestly, I think, you know, it nearly comes down to a bit of altruism there. But all of the other marketplaces would be incentivized to do something like this, so that they actually get people to move over to their marketplace. So there's a bit of tug of war going on, maybe. You know, I haven't talked to OpenSea, I can't speak for them. But yeah, there's going to be an interesting dynamic, I'd say, that would play out here. I also think marketplaces should consider looking at the idea, maybe if a royalty registry isn't available right now, they should be open to the idea of maybe that being the way to go in the future, because, you know, this isn't backwards compatible with existing royalties, NFTs with existing royalties. So there's that, and like a registry would kind of maybe would give you that truly interoperable idea around a marketplace being able to handle all royalties for all NFTs. But I think
compatibility shouldn't be too bad, actually, since you inherit 165. In any royalty logic, you could just check if the NFT contract is 2981 compliant. If it is, then this. If not, then that.
Yeah, I suppose I'm kind of like thinking about an NFT that already exists that has maybe some bespoke royalties built in.
I see what you're saying. I was thinking in the marketplace, you're talking about the NFT. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. But yeah, I think marketplaces should just be cognizant of the idea that royalties could become a registry, or but I think that 2981 is a really good first step to even add to their kind of code flow there.
And in regards to the current different ways that these big platforms, OpenSea, Rarible, Known Origin, are implementing some of these royalties under the hood, do you see a future of reconciliation or trying to use this EIP to kind of, bring those all back together? Because obviously they have a lot of, value locked into those, and a lot of different NFTs that are defined by their different editions or whatever they call them under the hood.
From a personal standpoint, yeah, I'd kind of love to see that consolidation happen. I think the best way to approach this is just kind of like getting the word out there to Ethereum developers. They really drive the changes in the market, I think. If they're creating with this interface, it's hard to ignore. And these platforms are maybe, they get their arm twisted into actually supporting something like this. So any efforts to raise awareness of it's definitely a good thing.
Do you see any future for NFT secondary market there?
So secondary market sales, is that what you're referring to?
That's right. Yeah, I understand. Like royalties in traditional world, generally it has an expiry date. So if this is a thing, in this case, for NFT on blockchains, how do you see would be the future for NFT secondary market?
I really like the idea of being able to kind of empower creators through the use of Ethereum. And like this EIP is definitely one way in which we're definitely going to try to support that. I believe that secondary market sales are very important. It keeps that recurring revenue for creators, and because it was defined up front, anyone buying it has already kind of bought into that idea of royalties. Yeah, I think secondary markets are incredibly important. I definitely think that we're going to see more of it over the development of this kind of NFT ecosystem, and not just constricted to NFT art, but also kind of like other deeds of ownership that require royalties, and you might see music rights in the future and different stuff like that. One thing I just remembered it, and it's about NFT marketplaces, would be the way in which they display this royalty information to buyers. So buyers need to be aware of this. So that would require, I didn't mention it in some of the code snippets, but that would require another invocation of this royalty info function, so that they display this royalty information to the buyer before maybe they buy, just to see if they agree to the terms. But that's just, yeah, I think a lot of marketplaces would know to do that anyway. So I think I answered your question, Pooja.
We recently saw this NFT sale for EIP-1559, as you mentioned in the beginning of the call, that people did incredible work for EIP-1559, and there was this group who actually sold some NFTs to fundraise, and as a gesture to appreciate the work done by the group, they distributed the funds. So there was this funny tweet today morning, like what to do with the NFT. So yeah, that brought me to the thought of NFT secondary market.
Yeah, I've seen now they're starting to be used to incentivize, donations to different things, and help out community members that have been volunteering. So I suppose it's kind of piggybacking on the NFT hype right now, but it's definitely a nice gesture, and I think we'll see a lot more of that.
In continuation to that, when we talk about this kind of fundraising and all, how do you see, I'm just curious to know your thoughts on NFT being used as a retroactive public good funding. Like I have seen this one example that I just mentioned. How do you see this to be in the long run?
So tell me if I'm understanding your question correctly. So is this is like issuing an NFT so that you're kind of raising money for some public good cause?
Right, to reward the project after that is done.
Right, yes. Yeah, like I said, that's specific use case is maybe quite popular right now because of the market sentiment around NFTs and people just want to own NFTs. There's going to and this is maybe a little bit more of a pessimistic viewpoint, but there's probably going to be a supply demand tug of war here, where supply is a lot more than the demand, and there's NFTs for everything. But I do like the idea of being able to prove that you kind of contributed to something. It definitely gives you that community feel about helping out with a greater endeavor. So I personally liked that kind of NFT 1559 stuff. So we might see more of that. Some people like to give donations anonymously. You can still do that even if you've got an NFT. But yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting concept.
Right. So this question, my next question is a little off the track, but about your personal interest. You mentioned in the beginning that you got attracted towards this proposal and started looking into it. Do you think Gemini or any other exchange may have interest in NFT standards? Has it not been your personal interest to get involved with this proposal?
So yeah, it's probably worth me mentioning this. I've worked on this on my kind of like own capacity outside of Gemini, but it's public information that Gemini has got a vested interest in Nifty Gateway, which is a popular NFT platform, and Nifty Gateway, along with other marketplaces, are definitely interested in royalty payments, and the market sentiment there is definitely that they all want to do this. So I think NFTs as a whole are interesting to any participant really in the crypto space. It's more of a cultural thing right now in crypto, and I think a lot of people see the potential, some don't, but they're obviously here to stay, as with everything on the blockchain. So I think it's exciting times.
Indeed. So this is one last question from my end. Are you aware of any NFTs on any other blockchain? And do you think the proposal will be helpful in for other blockchains as well, if they are trying to have this royalty setup for NFTs?
So I suppose that would be targeting other kind of smart contract enabled blockchains. And this is something I learned from kind of getting involved in Ethereum improvement proposals, is that is it really an idea of copying and pasting specifications from one smart contract platform to another? Like, is it really that simple? And I don't think it is. For this one specifically, potentially, it's quite straightforward. Obviously, depends on what VM that smart contract platform is running. You won't be able to use Solidity or whatever language, but for a lot of it, the ideas can be copied. There's still probably work. There still would need to be work for those platform specific things, and that's one of the things that makes me feel like community is everything with blockchains. And if you can get a community to swarm around problems and build these specifications like ERC20 and 1559 and 721, like that's the things that really make the ecosystem hardened and allows it to grow. And the idea of being able to copy and paste these things on the other platforms, yeah, you can take the ideas, but I think it's a little bit more complex than just that.
Right, I totally agree to that. But I think with the use of interoperability, at least we can make good usage and maybe exchange of information from one marketplace to another marketplace if they are on different chains.
Oh yeah, definitely. And like, especially if there's a chain that is EVM compatible, you've seen different layer 2 solutions or side chains, Matic and Polygon, they've got these bridges that you can lock 721 token in provably in a smart contract and kind of mint it on their chain, and you can do things with it that way. So like, yeah, then those EVM compatible chains can easily take advantage of these specs. I think that's really powerful.
Right. Yeah, this was interesting. I mean, I'd hate myself for saying this on camera, but this was my first sincere attempt to learn how NFT can be helpful for people to make a living. And to my surprise, this is not as difficult as I thought it would be. So thank you, Blaine, for taking out time and talking about the proposal with nice diagrams and examples. It was awesome.
Yeah.
We're close to the assigned time, so I guess it's time to wrap up. Blaine, would you be sharing your final thoughts about the EIP-2981 for the projects and the team who are trying to implement it?
I would say the obvious one, which is just kind of like read the EIP. Any questions, just ask in the GitHub discussion or jump on the Discord. I'm sure, Pooja, you'll probably share these slides. Everyone's really happy to help. Be aware of some of the nuances that I mentioned earlier. Also kind of be forward looking, think about other kind of NFTs that aren't using this spec as a marketplace, like how are you going to support those, displaying the royalty information to users, calculating exactly the percentage models using basis points and keeping precision, and then sending the payments. So making sure that is this address kind of like a contract? If it is, what are you going to do in that situation? If it's an externally owned account, then what are you going to do? Do you have delays on these things? So just sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but yeah, a lot of different things there, and any issues, just jump out to the community and everyone's happy to help.
Yeah, and I would like to mention this, one thing that was discussed earlier in the conversation about time-based royalty. So if there is no proposal, or this proposal is actually not fully compatible with whatever the process or the program the other team is trying to develop, I think it's a good opportunity to have an Ethereum improvement proposal submitted for that, and that can be using this 2981 as like a mandatory proposal, EIP in first place, and then add whatever the standard that they are trying to make for this time-based royalties. So there are plenty of opportunities to improve this process for NFT in general, but I think this proposal in general is a good start. So I hope to see some API to query proposal that you mentioned, like that can be helpful as well, and many more to add support implementing this in projects and help growth of the NFT community. So on this note, for all our YouTube viewers, thanks for watching. If you like it, please share it with people of similar interest. We have added guests' Twitter handle and the presentation, and links to reference resources in the description section. As usual, I'll be looking forward to your feedback. You may leave a comment below. I read all of them, so reach me on ECH Discord or Twitter at PoojaRanjan19 if you have any question for the team or for the author. We'll try to relay to them. Next week, we are going to have a special episode on MEV Flashbot with Tomas Stanza. I'm sure you don't want to miss the opportunity, so stay tuned, keep watching, keep sharing your love with Ethereum Catalyst. See you all in the next episode.